today's topic is on how to write on a blog. So to identify the main features of a speech and an article, to understand the structure of a speech and language techniques used, to identify the main features of a blog, and to look at an example as well. So how to write it. So most of you probably haven't ever written a speech before. And it's nothing to worry about. They are very simple, and I know I can obviously say that it's simple, and you're probably thinking no, they're not. But within your functional skills exam, you'll be asked to write a speech. Again, you might never have done it. How do you write one? First of all, I'd say don't panic, don't freak out. If you haven't done it before, writing a speech can sound intimidating. So with the right technique, anyone can write a speech that will score well in your final writing exam. So a speech is simply an official verbal presentation that is meant to achieve a certain goal. The aim of making a speech or even writing one is to convince your audience to buy into your idea or pay attention to your subject of discussion. In an exam setup, an examiner might ask you to write a speech on a popular topic, or you could be asked to imagine yourself as someone else giving a speech to a different audience. So the next few slides give you the tips that you can use to help you prepare to write a speech. So step one is your introduction. The first thing to do in any speech you write is to introduce yourself. So a speech in your English writing exam, make sure you obviously have an introduction. So the introduction is an opportunity to show your examiners that you can adapt to introduce yourself to any audience. The two examples below where you can introduce yourself accordingly are if you're giving a speech to your teachers, because you're talking to your teachers, in this example, your introduction would need to be more formal. So an example of it will be, hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen. My name is Lauren Smart, and I'm here today to talk about, and then you continue your introduction. Notice how the speechwriter in this example uses their full name and is very polite to his audience. Your second example is you're making a speech to your classmates. So in this example, your language can be a bit more casual. Your classmates already know you, they know you, so they know who you are. So an example of it would be, hi everyone, most of you already know me. My name is Charlotte. I'm the one who sits at the back of the class. The speechwriter is far less formal, but that's perfect for the actual audience. You're speaking to her equals, and she can connect with them far more effectively by using the language they would usually use with each other. So remember, your introduction is an opportunity to be creative and introduce yourself to your audience who you mean to go on with.
I'm sure if you've been on any of these before, you'll heard us say that functional skills is meant to be everyday functioning. So it is responding to that briefly. And again, it's not expecting that you're not going to be asked to do a speech on nuclear physics. It's going to be an everyday kind of thing. So it's being, as Amos said, realistic to you, that if you're asked to talk about something, that just put yourself in that situation, go, how would I personally handle this? There's no right or wrong necessarily in terms of how you would, but it's your interpretation of that environment, whether you think it's slightly more formal, slightly less formal, and those kind of things.
Yeah, as long as you've decided who your target audience is, the level of structure in your writing should just flow quite naturally. So step two, make a great opening statement. So now that you know who your audience is, it's time to make them pay attention. You should always begin writing your speech in a way that's quite catchy. So you want to craft an introduction that will captivate your target audience. A good opening statement is fairly brief, but uses language techniques to make an immediate impact. So to begin your speech, try using one of the following language techniques. So again, we've mentioned these techniques a few webinars ago. So even if you go over to have a look at different techniques, by all means do so. So the rhetorical question is a really good one. It's normally hitting your level 2 criteria in your exam. So as soon as your examiner sees that you've used a rhetorical question and you've carried on with your writing, that's hitting that mark scheme already. So your rhetorical questions are questions that obviously don't expect the audience to answer. So why do we use them? We use them so it makes your reader think about what you're trying to say, what message you're putting across to them. So when you ask that question to the audience, they want to know an answer. So obviously they'll pay attention. If you then provide an answer to your own question, your audience will be hooked. So an example of that will be, I'm here to talk to you about what ordinary people can do to fight against climate change. Why? Because we're running out of time to act. So it's a rhetorical question and you've answered it yourself. rather than waiting on an answer comment from the audience. So a surprising statement. Surprises are quite a powerful tool in any speech. It makes your audience sit up and pay attention. Think of the most surprising opinion or fact you want to convey in your speech, and then use it at the beginning of your writing. A famous quote is a quite good one. So don't worry about going back and revising famous quotes before your exam. The quote itself won't get you the marks, but if you can remember which one is relevant to your speech topic, it will demonstrate your creativity and flair. And again, it's a technique that the examiner will look for. So your examples of it could be: a wiser woman than me once wrote, "It's our choices that show we are who we truly are and what our abilities are." Think about how these different techniques effectively grab your attention, and remember that you can do the same with your own speech as well. So they're just a few language techniques that I've put in. But again, you can use any language technique and the examiner will look for them within your speech. So step 3, structure your speech. To structure your speech and make it easy for your audience to understand your point, split it into 3 sections. So introduction, main body, and your conclusion. In each section, you're trying to achieve a different aim. So the introduction, your aim is to tell your audience who you are and what you're talking about, and then you want to grab their attention. The main body of your speech is where you make your argument. So divide this main body into 2 to 3 points, and each separate point is a separate paragraph. So that's where you'll find your 2, 3, maybe 4 paragraphs. And at the end comes your conclusion. A good conclusion, or take everything into consideration, sums it up, and then you can give it a for or against if you want to. And that again is your level 2 criteria. So step 4, begin each paragraph with a topic, sentence. So because you're dividing your speech into separate paragraphs, it's important to make it clear what each section is about. So to do that, ensure you have a topic sentence for each paragraph. So an example of this could be: jellyfish are the second thing I want to put into room 101, and for good reason. So that could be the starting title of that paragraph, and then you can go into detail about what it is you're talking about and your point.
Going back to the technique that Emma mentioned before about rhetorical questions, that could be a good start to every paragraph. So like Emma said, so why am I going to talk about this? So the next paragraph might be, so what do I think you can do? And the next one might be, so do you know, so let's look at what I've been doing over the last few weeks. So actually you can start each paragraph by introducing it in that way. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, it's quite a useful, powerful tool, as Emma said, because it gets the audience both ready for what you're going to say, but also to think about their own response as well.
Yeah, of course. And with linking in with what you just said, Paul, I think when you go over your text, whether it's a speech, an article, a blog, whatever it is you're writing, make sure you're reading each paragraph. And even at the end of it, if you put "so what" in question marks, make sure you've answered that "so what" yourself in that paragraph, so you know what it is you are delivering. So if you understand it, your examiner's going to understand it. So the next step 5, express your opinion. So the most common mistake students make when writing a speech is they don't express their opinion. So opinions are the element that make a speech interesting. Whatever you're writing about in your speech, express yourself. Don't just write about a topic, write about what you think about as well. So what if you don't have a strong opinion on the subject? Imagine if you do. You don't necessarily, so whatever the subject, the topic is they've asked you to write about, you don't necessarily need to have an actual real life opinion. You can just make it up, because the examiner will never know. So right from that perspective, make it up. The examiner won't care about your opinion or whether they agree with it. What they will care about is you expressing an opinion in a persuasive and an engaging way. And that's where, again, they'll start marking you on that technique, so how persuasive you are and how engaged the reader will be. So step 7, first person to engage your audience. So your writing style would be using first person. So when writing your speech, always ensure that you write using the first person. This means use I as you write. By doing this, your audience will recognize that what you are saying is your opinion. You should also address your audience directly, as if you are actually talking to them. So use we and you in your writing. So for an example, I'm sure you'd all agree that, or as a community, we need to. So using the third person makes each of your audience members sit up and listen. It makes them think about how your topic and argument applies to them.
And again, a bit like your last one, the marker doesn't know, you're creating the scenario. So if you want to say, as a community, we all rallied together last month when we had a meeting at the town hall, that doesn't need to be real, and nobody minds whether it's real or not, but you can put a scenario in and have quite a lot of information that you can put there based on what you think could have happened.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. So the language techniques and styles, and I know we've, again, in every topic, I try and cover these just because I know you will be marked on them. So if you have 2 to 3 language techniques, you hit a lot of the level 2 criteria. So what the examiner is looking for, you've already met that. So again, rhetorical question is a very good one. So you're using your rhetorical questions to write your speech. It's suggested you should use this technique in the opening section of your speech. Remember, rhetorical questions grab your audience and your examiner's attention. So don't ask too many questions or you'll begin to sound like you don't know what you're talking about. A good rule of thumb is to do 2 to 3 rhetorical questions throughout your speech, each in different paragraphs. So you might use it in your introduction and then miss a paragraph and use it towards the end of the 3rd paragraph where you've got a second point. So try and let your rhetorical questions flow through your written work. Emotive language is one of the most basic but effective tools a writer can use. So in your speech, things shouldn't simply be described just as good or bad. They should be fantastic or horrible, pure or corrupted, exciting or disappointing. Notice how these example words express more than just good or bad. They also add other flavors to your description. So be careful not to overuse emotive language, because if you go over the top, it'll reduce the effectiveness of your actual work. Use emotive words sparingly throughout your speech. So again, even if you start to use too much of them, it will start losing the flow of your writing, and it might not even make sense to the examiner with what you are trying to say. To you, it might make sense. To the examiner, it might not. Just be careful with how much of it you're trying to use. Figurative language. As with emotive language, this shouldn't be overused, but used sparingly. A figurative language creates powerful images in your audience's mind. There are many types of this type of language, but these are the main ones you should focus on in your speech. So a simile, describing something to be like something else. For instance, she has eyes like a hawk, he's thin as a twig, or they're fighting like cats and dogs. A metaphor, describing something by using a word that isn't literally relevant. For example, it's raining men, I'm feeling blue, or the weather was bitterly cold. Imagery, using words to make sure you imagine how they would affect your senses. So, for example, a sweet apple, a sharp pen, the lion roared. So again, once the person reading your text can, imagine all of what it is that you're trying to put across, it senses automatically that language technique that you've used in your writing. Do we have any questions so far?
No, nothing at the moment. I have mentioned on the chat about you touched on it a couple of times about language techniques and language styles. And when we went through them, it was a few weeks ago now that we did a webinar on them, looking at reading really, but actually I think a lot of those things were relevant for writing. So I've said if anybody didn't get the language techniques webinar or didn't attend, let us know and we can send that out.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. Super. So try and follow this rule. I really like this, and I know Paul did as well when we discussed it earlier. So writing a good speech is fairly simple. All you need is practice, and more practice before sitting your functional skills to write an exam. Following acronym might help you remember some of the points we have discussed and help you score highly in your English exam. The personal anecdotes to bring your speech to life, which is your P. E is your emotive language to persuade your audience. R is your rhetorical questions to make your audience listen. F is your figurative language, such as metaphors and similes. Emphasis is the E, and it runs through repetition and the rule of 3. Comparison and contrast is the C, and it makes sure that your points are quite clear. T is the tone of voice, which is quite relevant and persuasive for your specific audience, and obviously that spells out perfect. So if you can remember them techniques within that word, I think you'll nail your functional skills right. So moving on, how to write a blog. So familiarizing yourself with a blog. This is it's relatively new within the new functional skills reforms. So there isn't a lot of text to go behind this or resources. The blogs are very similar to articles and newspaper in regards to layout features.
I think the other thing, sorry, Eamon. I think the other thing, we were talking about this before, weren't we? And it's difficult to give a set way for a blog, because the whole point of a blog is it's a personal thing. So actually, they are very different. A newspaper article tend to follow a similar pattern, but blogs can be absolutely anything. And they do video blogs and picture blogs and all sorts. So it is difficult to know exactly what they want for this one. But I know you've got some suggestions.
Yeah, I've tried to pull something together just so you've got a bit of an overview about it. So blogs are very similar to articles and newspaper in regards to layout features. So if you think about headlines, subheadings, images, they are very similar to a blog as well. So the origin of the word blog is an abbreviation for weblog, and it's an online diary. Blogs are written by many people all over the world for lots of different purposes. So there can be diaries or records of what you cook, a travel log for people visiting different destinations, or book group blogs, or many other sorts of blogs, but there's a few that are pulled together for you. So the purpose of the writing depends on what kind of blog it is. So what do blogs include? Often blogs have lots of pictures to make them look attractive. They vary in size, font, and appearance of text just for the effect of it. They use links to connect to other web pages, and they can actually include the hyperlinks for the video clips as well. Blogs are usually quite personal, so they're written in first person and written partially for the author's own benefit. The language is often informal and quite chatty, but again, try and steer away from the slang writing structure. So blogs may not have a clear audience other than anyone who's actually interested in it. And blogs can also be used by organisations to communicate informally with their audience. Because they're online, they can be regular and respond to events quite quickly. So an example that I found online is the post from a blog for people studying English by Victoria Elliott. It talks about a visit to the garden of C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia books. So obviously I'm not going to read through this, but that is a typical blog. So it's got the headline, it's got a subheading underneath it, and then the writing structure. She's got 4 paragraphs, but again, she uses rhetorical questions, she talks in first person, and she relates back to the actual title of what they're trying to talk about the blog. So the analysis, which is of the previous slide, it contains factual information. It shows the writer's opinion, and is obviously written in first person. It makes reference to the Narnia books, which the audience will be expected to know and be interested in with reading the blog. It has a photograph of the place, which obviously what they're describing. It uses rhetorical questions to help engage the reader, and it also makes a pun in the title. So C.S. Lewis was a member of a group known as the Inklings. The word inkling now means hint or suggestion. So again, using pun is another technique within your writing. Does anyone have any questions, or are we okay?
But nothing so yet.
Perfect. So then we come towards the end of the presentation. It's quite short and snappy. There was a fair bit of detail in there, but there's not a lot to worry about with speech and blogs. I think quite similar in regards to layout and structure. But if you hit the techniques, you're hitting the level 2 criteria.
I think they're probably a bit more natural than I mean, certainly things like formal letters, which few people wrote formal letters nowadays, and even newspaper articles, people might not have written them before and things. But a speech is what you would say, and a blog is your thoughts mainly. So a little bit more natural, aren't they? I think than some of the other things you might have asked to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I suppose the only thing with that is that therefore you might need a bit more imagination, that some people are stronger than others. But again, as I said, I say every webinar, they're not expecting this wonderful prose as though you're a fantastic speechwriter. They're expecting something that's practical, that can be used in everyday setting.
Yeah, and again, it's more imagination, so don't worry about it being real and it has actually happened. No, as long as it's something that captivates the reader's attention, that's what the examiner's looking for. So you're looking to persuade in your writing as well as captivate the attention, and once you've hit them techniques, you're hitting the high-end level 2 work. So coming towards the end of it, these are 2 mock exams I've pulled together for you. The one on the left is the speech, and then the one on the right is a blog. So if you want to write these with it when you've got time and send them back to your tutors. We can then mark them and send them back to you and let you know what you can either add to them, or if they're brilliant and you don't need to add any more. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Any questions?
There haven't been any questions coming through on the chat, so if anybody's got any you want to add them, you're welcome to, or turn your microphone on if you want to. One thing I'll ask quickly, Eamon, is can you explain how common are things like speeches and blogs? Are they something that people are likely to get, or are they less common in tests? Or
I think with the speeches, they're quite common, so they do pop up in level 1 and possibly level 2 as well. However, the blogs, they've introduced them quite new into the system, so I do think they'll weave in quite a lot.
I think you're right. I think blogs is so again, we've talked before about there's 2 different styles of functional skills running at the moment, and blogs tend to be in the newer style, which I think most people call R, but they could be in the old one as well. But I think you're right, because they're newer, because it's a new thing that the auditing body have started asking for. I think you'll find quite common at the moment. I remember a while ago when they started introducing things like articles, and you saw every test had an article in it then because it was a new thing. And I think blogs will be quite a common one coming up. The good thing about that is we'll then get some idea of exactly what they're looking for, because we can get some more feedback. At the moment it is a bit sketchy because it is a personal interpretation of what's in a blog. Of course. If we do get more indication, we can let people know that, but I think blogs are probably going to be quite common going forward, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tried to look at different examining boards, and they haven't got anything as of yet, so it's pretty much similar with City and Guilds. If you look back at the mock exam on the right hand side, that's the only one that they've got within the new reforms. And looking at the old ones, they don't have anything on blogs that pulled together. So it is quite hit and miss. But I think if we cover what we've gone through in the presentation, you're most likely to hit the level 2 criteria. And we're quite strict markers, me and Paula. So if we can mark them at level 2, I think you've nailed it.